Let me ask you something, and don't rush past it or soften it to make yourself more comfortable. When was the last time you did something only for yourself and didn't explain it to anyone, didn't announce it, didn't justify it, didn't look around to see who noticed, but simply moved quietly in your own direction because you knew it was necessary? For most people, that question lands harder than expected because they realize how rarely they act without an audience in mind. They realize how often their decisions are filtered through how they will be perceived, misunderstood, praised, or criticized. If that realization creates resistance in you, if it feels unsettling rather than empowering, then this message is for you. Because that discomfort is not a weakness, it is a signal. If you are done letting the world pull you in every direction, if you are tired of scattering your energy on things that do not build you, then drop this in the comments right now. My silence is my strength. No distraction shall control me. As a declaration of your focus, let's begin. Most people do not lose in life because they lack intelligence, talent, or opportunity. Those are convenient explanations, but they are rarely the real reason. People lose because their attention is fractured, scattered across opinions that do not build them, comparisons that drain them, and noise that disguises itself as connection. Their energy is spent reacting rather than directing, responding rather than creating, maintaining appearances rather than making progress. The loudest voices around you, the ones who always have something to say about what you should be doing, are very often the ones making the least movement in their own lives. They have time to comment because they are not busy building. This is about how to focus on yourself and win in silence. Not to prove anything to anyone, not to collect admiration, and not to settle imaginary scores, but to reclaim something most people slowly give away without realizing it: their personal power. Power is not dominance, and it is not visibility. Power is the ability to act in alignment with your values without needing permission, applause, or reassurance. That kind of power grows quietly, and the first truth you must accept, even if it stings your pride, is that not everyone needs to know what you are doing. You were conditioned, subtly and constantly, to share progress, to announce intentions, to document effort, and to explain plans so others could support you. But most people do not listen in order to support. They listen in order to measure. They measure you against their own unresolved fears, their own abandoned ambitions, and their own internal ceilings. Without malice and often without awareness, they project those limits onto you. A friend questions whether your plan is realistic. A colleague suggests you are overreaching. A family member warns you not to change too much, not because they are cruel, but because your growth forces them to confront their stagnation, and most people avoid that confrontation instinctively. This is why the first move in winning silently is to stop narrating your life. You stop announcing discipline as if it were an achievement. You stop explaining boundaries as if they require consensus. You stop debating decisions that are already made. Silence is not secrecy, and it is not deception. Silence is strategy. It protects your intent while it is still fragile. It keeps your energy from being siphoned into conversations that produce nothing but doubt and delay. But this is not only about managing other people. It goes deeper because the real battlefield is internal. The moment you declare your goals out loud, something subtle but dangerous happens psychologically. Your brain receives a premature reward. You feel a sense of progress without having earned it. You mistake articulation for action, intention for execution. That small hit of satisfaction reduces urgency. It blunts hunger. It tells your nervous system that movement has already occurred, when in reality, nothing has changed. This is why people who talk constantly about what they are going to do often struggle to do anything consistently. Quiet people stay hungry. Loud people feel full too early. Winning in silence preserves tension. It keeps pressure on the system. It forces behavior instead of performance. Many people misunderstand what it means to focus on yourself because they confuse discipline with selfishness and solitude with avoidance. They imagine that focusing on yourself means cutting everyone off, withdrawing emotionally, or becoming indifferent to others. That is not focus. That is escape. Real focus is far more demanding. It requires you to make deliberate choices about where your energy goes and where it does not. It means you stop reacting to every stimulus simply because it is present. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop attending arguments that do not pay you anything in growth, clarity, or stability. There is a critical realization that changes how you move through the world once you see it clearly. Every reaction is a leak. Every unnecessary emotional response drains fuel that could have been invested in building something real. When you argue online, when you defend your choices to people who have no authority over your life, when you correct every misinterpretation, you are spending energy without return. Selectivity is not arrogance. It is resource management. You do not correct every lie. You do not respond to every provocation. You do not prove yourself to people who decided your value before they knew you. You let results speak, because results do not argue, and they do not negotiate. This shift often leads you into solitude, and this is where most people panic. Solitude is misunderstood as loneliness, but the two are not the same. Loneliness is the craving for attention. Solitude is mastery over it. When you begin to focus on yourself seriously, you will spend more time alone, not because no one wants you, but because access now has a cost. Your time, your attention, and your emotional availability are no longer free resources. In solitude, your thoughts grow louder, your weaknesses surface, your excuses lose their camouflage. There is no audience to distract you from yourself, and that is precisely why most people avoid it. They stay busy to avoid thinking. They stay social to avoid self-examination. They stay distracted to avoid accountability. But solitude is where clarity is forged. It is where you discover who you actually are, without applause, without roles, and without validation. You cannot build a strong inner world in a crowded mental space. So you begin cutting mental clutter deliberately. You scroll less because you understand what it does to your focus. You explain less because you no longer need permission to act. You reduce emotional availability to people who add no value, not out of resentment, but out of respect for yourself and the life you are building. Underneath all of this lies a quiet fear that most people never say out loud. What if people forget about me? What if I lose connections? What if I miss out? The truth is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. People who only notice you when you are constantly available were never connected to you, only to your accessibility. When you focus on yourself, some people will fade, and that is not a failure. Not everyone is meant to walk with you into your next level. Some people were only meant to know the version of you that needed them. Trying to drag them forward will only slow you down. Winning in silence requires emotional detachment, not coldness, but clarity. You stop needing to be seen. You stop needing to be chosen. You stop needing approval as a condition for movement. As that dependency dissolves, something unexpected happens. The quieter you become, the sharper your focus gets. The sharper your focus, the faster progress compounds, because your energy is no longer scattered, it is aligned. At this point, discipline becomes unavoidable, because silence without discipline is just hiding. Focusing on yourself means doing boring things consistently when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, and when motivation has evaporated. You wake up when you said you would. You train your body because strength stabilizes the mind. You study because competence reduces anxiety. You work because execution creates confidence. You rest intentionally because recovery is part of strategy, not a reward for burnout. You do these things not because they feel good in the moment, but because they build power over time. Power does not announce itself. It arrives slowly, quietly, and unmistakably. When you begin to win silently, people will eventually notice. but only after the results are visible. When they do, they will rewrite history. They will say you got lucky. They will say you changed. They will act as if it happened overnight. Let them. They were not there for the quiet mornings, the lonely discipline, or the self-doubt you worked through without applause. Silence protected the process. Noise would have only invited interference. This is where the internal metric becomes everything. You stop measuring your life by likes, validation, or opinions, and instead, you ask yourself a different set of questions. Did I do what I said I would do today? Did I respect my time and energy? Did I move one step closer to the person I am becoming? If the answer is yes, then the day was not wasted, regardless of whether anyone noticed. No one else needs to know. This brings us to the core of winning in silence. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loud one, it is the focused one. The one who listens more than they speak, who observes instead of reacts, who is building while everyone else is explaining. That person does not need attention, because attention would only slow them down. They are too busy becoming. To understand what winning in silence actually looks like in the real world, it helps to strip away abstraction and watch how it plays out over time in a single life. Imagine a man who decides, quietly and without ceremony, that the way he has been living is no longer acceptable to him. He does not announce this decision. He does not post about transformation or ask for encouragement. He simply notices that his days feel scattered, his reactions automatic, and his ambitions diluted by constant explanation. So he begins with one small act of discipline that no one else can see. He wakes up earlier, not to impress anyone, but to reclaim an hour that once belonged to distraction. That hour is uncomfortable at first. There is no applause in the quiet, no validation in the stillness, only the weight of his own thoughts. But he stays. As weeks pass, that hour becomes the anchor of his day. He uses it to train his body, sharpen his skills, and think clearly about what actually matters. When people ask what he has been doing lately, he gives simple answers. Nothing elaborate, nothing revealing. He learns that the less he says, the more energy he retains. He notices something else too. When he stops explaining himself, people project their own stories onto him. Some assume he is struggling. Others assume he is hiding something. He lets them assume. Their assumptions cost him nothing. This is where most people would break. They would rush to correct the narrative, to clarify misunderstandings, to defend their silence. But he does not. He understands something most people never learn. You do not owe clarity to people who are not responsible for your future. He continues his routine. He continues his work. He continues refining his inner standards. Months pass, then years. When the results finally surface, they appear sudden to everyone else. To him, they feel inevitable. This is the discipline most people underestimate. Silent progress feels slow because there is no external reinforcement. There is no social proof to lean on when doubt creeps in. You are forced to rely on something far more stable, self-trust. Each day you do what you said you would do, even when no one is watching. You reinforce an internal contract. Over time, that contract becomes unbreakable. You stop needing motivation because consistency has replaced it. You stop needing encouragement because evidence has accumulated quietly in your favor. Stoicism teaches that we should concern ourselves only with what is within our control, but most people misunderstand this as emotional suppression. It is not. It is emotional precision. You learn to differentiate between what deserves your energy and what does not. Opinions fall outside your control. Recognition falls outside your control. Timing often falls outside your control. But effort, preparation, restraint, and follow-through are always yours. Winning in silence is the practice of redirecting attention away from outcomes you cannot command and toward behaviors you can execute daily. This is why silence strengthens discipline. When you remove the performance aspect of growth, you are left with nothing but the work itself. There is no one to impress when you train your body alone. There is no one to praise you when you study after a long day. There is no one to reassure you when progress feels invisible. That isolation is not a punishment, it is a filter. It removes everyone who would dilute your focus and forces you to confront whether your goals are real or merely aspirational. There will be moments when doubt surfaces sharply. You will wonder if you are falling behind, if you are missing opportunities, if you should be more visible, more vocal, more present. This is where Stoic clarity becomes essential. Visibility does not equal value. Noise does not equal movement. Many people are seen constantly and go nowhere for decades. Others disappear for a season and return fundamentally changed. The difference is not talent, it is restraint. Restraint is one of the most powerful but least celebrated virtues. It means you do not spend energy proving things prematurely. It means you do not seek comfort in recognition before the work is complete. It means you can sit with uncertainty without needing immediate feedback. In a world that rewards constant output of opinion, restraint feels unnatural. That is precisely why it is effective. As you deepen this practice, your relationships will change. Some people will feel unsettled by your calm. They will interpret your boundaries as distance and your silence as judgment. This is not something you need to correct. When you stop over-explaining, you reveal who was attached to your presence and who was attached to your availability. The former will adapt, the latter will drift away. This is not cruelty, it is alignment. There is also a practical dimension to focusing on yourself that many philosophical discussions ignore. Silence gives you leverage. When people do not know your next move, they cannot interfere with it. When they do not know your timeline, they cannot rush you. When they do not know your internal struggles, they cannot exploit them. This does not mean you trust no one. It means you choose carefully who has access to unfinished parts of your life. You share outcomes, not intentions. You reveal results, not drafts. This selective disclosure creates psychological safety. You are no longer defending a process in progress. You are no longer negotiating your vision with people who do not carry its weight. That safety allows you to take bigger risks internally, to push harder without fear of public failure, to refine rather than rush. Ironically, the less you seek validation, the more confident your actions become, because they are rooted in conviction rather than reaction. Over time, something subtle but profound happens. Your identity shifts from someone who talks about change to someone who embodies it. You no longer need to convince yourself that you are disciplined because your behavior proves it daily. You no longer fear being overlooked because you trust your trajectory. You no longer chase attention because attention has lost its utility. It cannot feed you what progress already provides. This is where many people finally understand why Stoic philosophers emphasized inner order over external success. External success without inner order creates anxiety, dependence, and fragility. Inner order, even without immediate success, creates stability, patience, and resilience. When success does arrive, it rests on a foundation that does not crack under pressure. Winning in silence is not about disappearing forever. It is about choosing the right moment to be seen. It is about allowing your work to mature without interruption. When you eventually speak, when you eventually step forward, your presence carries weight because it is backed by substance. You do not need to announce your comeback, because there was never a departure from discipline, only a withdrawal from noise. The world is full of people explaining themselves endlessly, defending choices they are unsure about, and reacting emotionally to every provocation. The focused individual stands apart not by arrogance, but by composure. They move deliberately, they speak sparingly, they act consistently. Their life becomes quieter on the surface and stronger at the core. This is the quiet power most people never develop because it requires patience in a culture addicted to immediacy. It requires faith in process when results are delayed. It requires self-respect when validation is absent. But for those willing to endure that season, the payoff is not just external success. It is internal freedom. At this stage, focusing on yourself is no longer a decision you make daily. It becomes the default posture of your mind. You stop asking whether something deserves your attention and instead assume it does not, unless proven otherwise. This single shift eliminates an enormous amount of friction from your life. Most people live as if everything requires a response. Every message, every opinion, every provocation feels urgent. The focused individual understands that urgency is often manufactured. Silence, when chosen deliberately, collapses false urgency and restores control. One of the most important internal dialogues you will develop during this process is the ability to observe your impulses without obeying them. You will feel the urge to explain yourself when misunderstood. You will feel the urge to react when challenged. You will feel the urge to announce progress when effort feels heavy. These urges are not flaws. They are remnants of an older survival pattern that sought safety through social approval. Stoic discipline does not demand that you eliminate these impulses. It demands that you pause long enough to choose whether acting on them serves your long-term aim. This pause is where power accumulates. When you delay reaction, you gain perspective. When you gain perspective, you see options others miss. While someone else is busy defending their ego, you are refining your strategy. While someone else is arguing, you are adjusting your trajectory. This is not passive behavior, it is calculated restraint. In many situations, the strongest move is not confrontation but continuation. As your internal standards solidify, you begin to replace external motivation with internal measurement. You no longer need someone to tell you that you are improving because you track evidence privately. You know how many days you showed up when you did not feel like it. You know how often you chose restraint over impulse. You know how consistently you honored your commitments when no one was watching. This private record becomes your anchor. It is far more reliable than praise because it cannot be taken away. There will be periods when this path feels isolating, not because you are alone, but because you are misaligned with the pace of the world around you. Others rush toward visibility, you move toward depth. Others seek affirmation, you seek accuracy. Others trade longevity for short-term recognition. You invest in durability. This difference in orientation creates distance, and that distance can feel uncomfortable if you are not prepared for it. The Stoic response is not to close yourself off emotionally, but to accept that alignment often requires separation. During these periods, it becomes essential to guard against a subtle danger: bitterness. Silence should never harden into resentment. Detachment should never decay into superiority. The moment you begin to see others as inferior rather than simply different, you have lost the discipline that made silence powerful. Stoicism is not about judging others. It is about governing yourself. You remain calm, not because you are above the world, but because you are no longer ruled by it. Another advanced element of winning in silence is learning to delay reward deliberately. Modern life trains you to expect immediate payoff for minimal effort. Silent builders reverse this conditioning. They accept delayed recognition as part of the process. They do not rush to monetize identity. They do not optimize for applause. They allow skill, reputation, and leverage to compound quietly. This patience gives them optionality later. When they finally choose visibility, it is on their terms. You will notice that as your patience grows, so does your tolerance for discomfort. You become less reactive to boredom, less anxious during uncertainty, and less dependent on stimulation. This emotional stability is not accidental, it is trained. Every time you resist the urge to check for validation, every time you continue working without feedback, every time you remain composed under misunderstanding, you strengthen the part of you that cannot be manipulated. Eventually, people begin to sense this shift. even if they cannot articulate it. Your presence feels steadier. Your words carry more weight because there are fewer of them. You are no longer explaining who you are becoming because your behavior demonstrates it. This is when opportunities tend to appear unexpectedly, not because you chase them, but because others recognize reliability, depth, and restraint as rare qualities. At this point, the temptation will be to break silence prematurely, to finally tell your story, to reveal the struggle behind the transformation. This is not wrong, but timing matters. Stoic wisdom teaches that truth delivered too early is often ignored, and truth delivered too loudly is often resisted. You speak when it serves the work, not the ego. You reveal when it strengthens alignment, not when it satisfies impatience. The final consolidation of winning in silence is the realization that you are no longer building toward an image of success, but toward a state of inner order. Success becomes a byproduct, not the objective. You measure your days by execution, not emotion. You measure your growth by consistency, not comparison. You measure your worth by integrity, not attention. At this level, silence is no longer something you practice. It is simply how you move. You do not announce change because change is ongoing. You do not defend boundaries because they are enforced through behavior. You do not explain absence because presence is intentional. Your life becomes less visible and more effective, less dramatic and more decisive. This is why the most dangerous person in any environment is not the loudest, the most charismatic, or the most expressive. It is the one who has learned to regulate themselves completely, the one who does not leak energy, the one who does not chase recognition, the one who can wait. That person does not rush, they do not panic, they do not need to be seen coming. They arrive fully formed, backed by discipline, clarity, and restraint. At the culmination of this practice, you realize that silence itself is not an absence, it is presence distilled. Every action, every decision, every movement carries weight because it is chosen deliberately, not performed for spectators. Your focus has sharpened to the point where distractions, noise, and shallow recognition pass over you like water over stone. You are no longer tethered to the expectations, insecurities, or commentary of others. Your energy belongs entirely to the work that matters, to the person you are becoming, and to the results that cannot be fabricated or borrowed. The people who once demanded your explanations, who thrived on gossip and opinion, will notice eventually, but by then, your progress will be undeniable. They may attempt to minimize it verbally, to reinterpret it as luck, or to imply it happened overnight. That is the natural response of those accustomed to loudness rather than depth. Let them talk. Their understanding is irrelevant to your trajectory. The victory does not require validation. The work itself validates. The quiet hours, the repeated effort, the deliberate choices, these are unassailable. To fully internalize this, consider how your focus now interacts with time itself. Time is no longer something you fritter away trying to prove yourself. Each hour is a tool, a resource, a lever. You allocate attention like capital, investing it in what compounds, eliminating what drains. Comparison evaporates because you measure against your own potential, not the reflection of someone else's success. The trivial urgencies of life lose their grip because they carry no strategic value. In this way, silence becomes a discipline of time as much as of action, a mastery of duration as much as of effort. Even your inner narrative changes, where once self-doubt and insecurity whispered, now observation and reason respond. Impulses to justify, explain, or perform fade because they have been tested and disciplined repeatedly. You no longer wait for external affirmation to confirm your identity. You know who you are becoming because you see the evidence in your consistency, your patience, and your restraint. Internal validation replaces external validation, and this replacement is not abstract, it is practical, tactical, and relentless. It fuels forward motion without ever running dry. One final, often overlooked aspect of winning in silence is the quiet confidence it generates. This confidence is not loud or performative. It does not demand recognition or prove superiority. Instead, it manifests as an unshakable center, a calm readiness for whatever the world delivers. Challenges no longer destabilize because preparation and discipline have created immunity. Criticism no longer disturbs because your standards are internal and unassailable. Opportunities no longer tempt recklessness because your purpose directs every choice. You move through life with a clarity and precision that cannot be faked, manipulated, or hurried. At this point, a curious paradox emerges. The less you announce, the more you are noticed. The less you chase recognition, the greater the impact of your presence. The less you react to every provocation, the more your reactions carry authority. People sense your depth because it is real, and they cannot imitate it. They cannot distract you from it. They cannot erode it with noise. You have become both unassuming and formidable, invisible and inevitable. And so the final lesson resolves into a single, enduring truth. The loudest victory is the one no one saw coming, because it was built in silence, sustained by discipline, and guided by purpose. You do not need to explain your growth, justify your absence, or defend your boundaries. You focus, you build, you sharpen. When the results arrive, they speak with clarity that no words ever could. They carry the authority of action, the weight of consistency, and the inevitability of strategic effort. They are unmistakable because they are real. This is the ultimate mastery of self. To act without the need for witness, to build without the need for applause, and to win without the need for notice. The power of silence is not simply that it shields, it transforms. It concentrates energy, refines judgment, and protects progress. It allows the individual who understands it to navigate the world with precision, to act decisively, and to emerge at the right moment fully formed, fully capable, and fully in command of what truly matters. Remember this: the person who wins in silence does not compete with noise. They rise above it. They are the still center around which the chaos of distraction spins harmlessly. They are the quiet force that eventually reshapes the environment without ever asking permission. And in this way, you reclaim not just results, but autonomy, focus, and, ultimately, freedom. The journey is difficult, often lonely, and rarely recognized in the moment, but it is the only path that leads to mastery that cannot be taken away, diluted, or misunderstood. So do not announce your comeback. Do not explain your absence. Do not defend your boundaries. Focus on the work that matters. Build consistently. Sharpen relentlessly. Let the results speak, because when they do, nothing can diminish their significance. The loudest victory, the one that endures and commands respect, is the one forged quietly, invisibly, and deliberately. It is the victory that no one anticipated, yet everyone ultimately acknowledges because it is real, complete, and undeniable.